In the autumn of 1996, in a peaceful suburb in Ohio, a young woman disappeared without warning on her wedding night. Police found no evidence. The case went cold almost instantly, leaving investigators with nothing to hold on to. But 21 years later, one small detail hidden in the background of a photograph reopened everything and uncovered a truth no one was prepared for. Before we get into it, if you're new here, consider liking this video and subscribing. It genuinely helps this channel grow. Now, let's get into today's case. Sarah Miller was the kind of person who seemed to bring sunlight into any room she walked into. 24 years old, a kindergarten teacher in a small town where everyone knew everyone, soft-spoken, endlessly patient, and fiercely protective of the people she loved. To her younger sister Emily, 16, at the time, Sarah was more than a sibling. She was a role model, a best friend, the steady thing in an unsteady world. Emily wanted to walk like her, talk like her, and someday find a love that looked as perfect as the one Sarah had found. That love was Mark Davies. Mark was 26, charming, well-educated, from a respected affluent family in the neighboring county. He worked in finance, drove a nice car, and knew exactly how to win over Sarah's parents, Thomas and Martha. He brought flowers for Martha on Sunday visits. He talked politics and business with Thomas like an equal. By every traditional measure, he was the perfect catch. Everyone said Sarah was the luckiest girl in the world. If there were cracks in the relationship, Sarah never let her family see them. She was always smiling, always agreeable, always looking forward. As the wedding approached, the Miller house turned into a whirlwind of white tulle and floral arrangements and endless guest lists. The date was set October 12, 1996, at the historic Oak Ridge Hotel, a sprawling estate famous for its gardens, its grand ballroom, and its maze of carpeted hallways. The morning of the wedding was crisp and clear, the autumn leaves burning gold and orange for the photographs. Emily stood beside her sister as a bridesmaid, adjusting the long lace train of Sarah's dress, heavy satin, delicate lace, tiny pearls catching the light with every movement. But looking back, Emily would remember a strange stillness in her sister that morning. Most brides buzz with nerves or cry happy tears. Sarah just sat at the vanity, hands flat on the wood, breathing slow and deliberate. At the time, Emily chalked it up to wedding day jitters. The ceremony went perfectly. Mark wept as Sarah walked the aisle. The vows were beautiful. The room cheered at the first kiss. The reception that followed had everything a wedding should: loud music, endless champagne, a packed dance floor. Sarah came alive again, dancing with her father, hugging her students' parents, smiling for every camera. But around 10 o'clock, the energy started to wind down. Older guests said their goodbyes. The music slowed. That's when Emily noticed her sister slip out through the side doors. She figured Sarah just needed a minute touch up her makeup, catch her breath away from the noise. Sarah was gone about 15 minutes. When she came back, she found Mark, whispered something in his ear, and the two of them started making the rounds to thank the last guests. By 11, the reception was over. The newlyweds were staying in the bridal suite on the 4th floor. Sarah's parents and Emily had rooms on the 2nd, planning to drive home the next morning. Hugs in the lobby. Martha crying a little as she held her eldest daughter. Thomas shaking Mark's hand, telling him to take care of his girl. Sarah pulled Emily into a long, tight squeeze. "I love you, Em," she whispered into her sister's hair. "Love you too." "Have a good trip," Emily said, already thinking about the honeymoon flight to Hawaii the next afternoon. Sarah and Mark stepped into the brass elevator. The doors slid shut. And that was the last easy moment any of them would have for 21 years. The Miller family went to their rooms, exhausted and happy. The wedding had been perfect, but perfection is often just a very thin illusion. At 2:15 in the morning, violent pounding shattered the quiet of the hotel. Emily jolted awake on the pull-out couch she shared with her parents. Her father threw off the blankets, stumbled to the door, and unlatched the deadbolt. Mark practically fell into the room's suit trousers, undershirt, bare feet, hair a mess. Eyes wide with a panic that made no sense on a groom's face. "She's gone," he gasped, grabbing Thomas by the shoulders. "Sarah, she's gone." Martha rushed out in her robe. "What do you mean, gone? Did she go for a walk? Is she in the lobby?" "No, you don't understand," Mark stammered. "I was in the shower. I came out, and she wasn't there. I checked the hallway, the ice machine, the front desk. The night manager hasn't seen her. Nobody's seen her. She's just gone." A cold feeling settled over Emily. It didn't make sense. It just didn't. Why would a bride leave her room at 2 in the morning? Thomas didn't waste a second. He grabbed his coat and ran, Mark, Martha, and Emily right behind him. They took the elevator to the 4th floor and sprinted down the long, quiet hallway to room 402. The door stood wide open. When Emily stepped inside, the breath left her lungs. The room was immaculate. No overturned lamps, no broken glass, no signs of a struggle. The bed hadn't even been slept in. On the small table by the window sat a champagne bucket, the ice long melted, 2 crystal glasses beside it, untouched. But it was the bed itself that made Emily's stomach drop. Laid out perfectly across the center of the mattress was Sarah's wedding dress, carefully removed, smooth, flat, almost displayed. Beside it sat her small beaded clutch. Martha opened it with shaking hands, driver's license, credit cards, car keys, all still inside. The closet door hung open. Sarah's overnight bag jeans, a gray sweater, white sneakers was gone. Everything else remained. "Sarah," Thomas shouted from the balcony into the black, empty night. Only the wind answered. Mark collapsed into a corner chair, face in his hands, rocking. Where is she? Where did she go? Emily stood frozen by the bed, staring at the empty dress. Something felt wrong. Really wrong. Her sister wouldn't walk out into the night without a word. She wouldn't leave her purse behind. She wouldn't do this to the people who loved her. Within 20 minutes, police lights lit up the front of the hotel. Officers swept the building, knocked on doors, searched the lobby, the kitchens, the gardens. Nothing. The young bride who just promised her life to the man of her dreams had vanished into the crisp autumn night, leaving nothing behind but an empty dress on a cold, undisturbed bed. Detective Ray Carter arrived not long after, late 40s, tired eyes, a slow, deliberate way of talking that stood in sharp contrast to the raw panic in the room. He didn't touch anything at first, just stood there, hands in his coat pockets, taking it all in. He pulled out a notepad and turned to Mark, still slumped in the velvet armchair. "Mr. Davies, walk me through exactly what happened when you two came up here. Take your time." Mark rubbed his face. "We came up around 11:30. Reception was over. We were tired. Sarah poured us champagne. We talked about the honeymoon Maui the next afternoon. Did she seem upset?" "No," Mark said, shaking his head fast. "She was happy, smiling, complained a little about her feet from the heels, that's it. She told me to shower first, said she needed a few minutes to get out of her dress. So I went into the bathroom, ran the water. How long were you in there?" 10 minutes. Maybe 15. The fan was loud, the water was loud. I didn't hear the door. When I came out, the room was empty. Her dress was on the bed. Her purse was still here. I figured she'd gone down the hall for ice. She never came back." Carter checked the bathroom lock, the hinges, the small window above the tub painted shut. He checked the sliding balcony doors locked from the inside. If Sarah had left, she'd walked out the front door of the suite and down the main hallway, in full view of anyone who happened to be looking. Emily watched from the corner, arms wrapped around herself. It didn't make sense. Her sister was afraid of the dark. She double-locked doors at night. She hated walking to her car alone. The idea of Sarah changing into jeans and sneakers and wandering into a freezing hotel parking lot at 2 a.m. contradicted everything Emily knew about her. By sunrise, the Oak Ridge Hotel had become an active crime scene. Yellow tape sealed the fourth floor. K-9 units arrived, given a piece of Sarah's clothing to scent. They pulled their handlers through the lobby, out a side door propped open earlier by catering staff, and across the wet grass toward the rear parking lot. 50 feet out, the scent stopped cold. The dog circled, whined, sniffed at the empty asphalt. No fade out, just gone. She got into a car, Carter muttered. But whose? The investigation moved fast over the next 48 hours. Every guest was interviewed. Catering staff, bartenders, the valet. The night manager, a college kid reading a textbook at the front desk, swore nobody matching Sarah's description had passed through after midnight. The hotel, being historic, had only one grainy black and white camera, and it pointed at the cash register. The footage showed nothing. Phone records for room 402, no calls out, none in. Bank accounts and credit cards, zero activity. She had evaporated into the autumn air. The days that followed were agony for the Millers. Thomas and Martha went home to a living room still stacked with unopened wedding gifts. Martha broke down every time she looked at them. Thomas stopped working entirely, driving the county for hours, staring into the woods, papering every telephone pole with flyers. Emily stopped going to school. She sat for hours in Sarah's childhood bedroom, replaying the wedding morning over and over. That stillness at the vanity. Was she scared? Was she hiding something? Police looked hard at Mark, as they should have. But his alibi held. His record was clean. His finances showed nothing unusual. He let them search his house, his car, his office, without objection. He passed a polygraph clean. He called the precinct 3 times a day for updates and put up $50,000 of his own money as a reward. As far as anyone could tell, Mark Davies was a grieving husband, not a suspect. Winter set in. Snow buried the ground where the dogs had lost the scent. Candlelight vigils, yellow ribbons on the oak trees in the square. And still, nothing. No witnesses, no struggle, no ransom note. The story slipped off the evening news. By late January, police told the family gently that they'd run out of active leads. Emily refused to accept it. If the police were out of road, she'd find her own. One quiet Tuesday, while her parents met with a private investigator they'd hired, Emily sat on the living room floor, sorting through boxes returned from the hotel fake flowers, leftover napkins, guest books. In one box, she found a stack of disposable cameras. Back in '96, it had been a trend to leave them on the reception tables for candid shots. The Millers had collected over 20. In the chaos after Sarah vanished, they'd been shoved into a corner and forgotten. Emily's heart started pounding. She gathered all 22, drove to the pharmacy, paid extra for 1 hour developing, and paced the aisles the whole time. She didn't know what she was hoping to find. Maybe a face that didn't belong. Maybe nothing. She didn't even wait to get home. She sat in her locked car in the parking lot, tearing open envelope after envelope. Blurry ants dancing. Overexposed cake shots. Crooked champagne toasts. Everyone looked happy. Everyone looked normal. She opened the last envelope, a camera from table 12, near the back of the ballroom, close to the side doors. A centerpiece. A laughing guest. And then, her breath caught. Her blood went cold. In the background of one photo, past 2 out-of-focus older guests dancing, stood Sarah alone, away from the crowd. Not smiling, eyes wide, posture stiff, looking down at her own hands. Emily held it up to the light and squinted. Sarah was holding a small folded piece of white paper. The next photo, seconds later, Sarah pushing through the heavy side doors, glancing back over her shoulder, one last panicked look into the crowded room. The timeline clicked instantly. This was the 15 minutes. The exact window before she returned, whispered to Mark, and went upstairs. She hadn't gone to the bathroom, Someone had handed her a note, and whatever it said had scared her enough to walk straight out of her own wedding. Emily didn't wait. She drove straight to the police station and slid the envelope across Detective Carter's desk, hands trembling too hard to do more than point. Carter studied the photo under a magnifying glass for a long, silent moment. "She didn't just walk out," Emily said. "Someone gave her that note. Someone terrified her. You have to find out who." It reopened the investigation. Police tracked down every guest who'd been near the back of the ballroom, re-interviewed the catering staff, pressed Mark on enemies, exes, debts. But this was 1996, no high-resolution cameras, no digital enhancement. The photo was too blurry to make out a face in the background. And memory, weeks later, was already fading. People remembered seeing Sarah. Nobody remembered who'd walked past her. The note was a ghost. Its messenger, a phantom. And Sarah stayed gone. Years did what years do. 5, then 10, then 15. The Millers didn't heal, they just learned to walk with a permanent limp. Thomas never stopped looking. He spent his retirement savings on private investigators, chased false sightings across state lines, kept a map of the country in his office bristling with red pins. The stress wore him down. In 2009, his heart gave out. His last words to Emily were an apology for never finding her sister. Martha shrank into herself, moved to a smaller house, unable to keep walking past Sarah's empty room. Mark, for his part, moved on. He stayed close to the Millers for a few years, crying with Martha, helping hang posters, but his visits thinned out. Eventually he relocated to Chicago, took an executive job, remarried into a wealthy family, had 2 kids, built a whole new life. The town slowly forgot the bride who vanished. Emily never did. 21 years passed. Summer 2017, Emily was 37 now, an accountant, living a few miles from her aging mother. The grief had long since dulled from a sharp panic into a heavy, permanent ache. She'd accepted Sarah was dead. She just wanted to know where, so she could finally say goodbye. Then, an ordinary Sunday changed everything. Emily was at Martha's, drinking iced tea, waiting on her cousin Jessica, who was stopping by after a 2-week road trip up the East Coast. Jessica arrived full of energy, put away groceries, sat beside Martha, and pulled out her iPad to show off vacation photos. This was Boston. This is Portland Harbor. Oh, you have to see this town we stayed in Maine. Camden, like stepping into a postcard. She handed the iPad over. A photo of Jessica's family on a brick sidewalk outside a rustic bakery, the Salty Pine, kids holding cookies the size of their faces, everyone grinning. Martha passed the tablet to Emily. Emily looked at the smiling family, at the wooden bakery sign. Then her eyes drifted to the background, a woman standing just outside the open door, holding a tray of fresh bread, caught mid-step by the flash. Mid-40s, short graying hair, a white apron over a blue flannel shirt. Emily stopped breathing. The room fell away. Jessica's voice turned to a muffled hum. Emily's hands shook as she pinched the screen, zooming in. The jaw, the slope of the nose, the eyes. "Emily?" Martha said. "Honey, what's wrong?" Emily couldn't answer. She zoomed tighter onto the woman's right hand gripping the edge of the tray, and there, on the wrist, a small dark star-shaped birthmark. The exact same birthmark her sister had. The exact same face, aged 21 years. "Where?" Emily choked out. "Where was this taken, Jessica?" "Camden, Maine, right outside that bakery." "Why?" Emily stood so fast she knocked her tea glass to the floor. It shattered. She didn't even look down. She handed back the iPad, grabbed her purse, and was out the front door without another word. In her car, doors locked, hands slick with sweat, she searched Salty Pine Bakery, Camden, Maine on her phone. A number came up. She stared at the call button, chest heaving, then pressed it. "Salty Pine Bakery. This is Hannah. How can I help you?" "Hi," Emily managed. I was helped by an older woman, short gray hair, a little star birthmark on her wrist. I wanted to compliment her but didn't catch her name. Oh, you mean Claire. She's the sweetest, she's the owner. Want me to grab her? She's just in the back frosting cakes. Emily's blood went cold. Claire, no, she whispered, tears already falling. Please don't bother her, thank you. She hung up and let the phone drop into her lap, covering her mouth with both hands as a sob broke out of her chest. Sarah wasn't dead. She hadn't been murdered, hadn't been taken from that hotel parking lot. She was alive. She owned a bakery in Maine. She had been alive this whole time, and that relief lasted exactly as long as it took the next thought to arrive. If she was alive, she'd chosen to leave. Chosen to leave her wedding dress on the bed, walk into the night, and let her mother cry herself to sleep for 20 years. Let her father die searching for a daughter who apparently didn't want to be found. Emily stared blankly through the windshield. None of it fit. Sarah had loved this family. She would never have caused that pain on purpose. Unless the note had warned her of something so dangerous that disappearing was the only way to keep them alive, and she couldn't tell them, because telling them would put them in the same danger. The grief cracked open, and something harder took its place. Emily was going to Maine. She was going to look her sister in the eye and find out exactly what was written on that paper 21 years ago, and exactly who Sarah had been running from. She told her mother nothing a business trip, an audit, a quick lie that would hold for a few days. If she was wrong, if this woman was just a look-alike, the disappointment alone might break Martha's fragile heart. Emily had to see it for herself first. The drive to Maine took 14 hours. Emily gripped the wheel until her knuckles went white, cycling through hope and rage in equal measure. Hope that her sister, her best friend, was still alive. Rage at the thought of her baking cookies in a postcard town while their father drove himself into an early grave looking for her. By the time she crossed into Maine, dawn was breaking over the coastal fog. She wound through tree-lined roads into the small harbor town of Camden. Sailboats bobbing in the cold water, brick storefronts glowing warm against the mist. She parked 2 blocks from the bakery and didn't go in. Couldn't. She sat with the window cracked, letting in the cold salt air, and watched. At 6 sharp, the door unlocked. A woman stepped out with a little chalkboard sandwich sign, set it down, wiped her hands on her apron, and looked up at the sky. It was her. Even with the gray hair, the fine lines, the 21 years, Emily knew her sister instantly. The tilt of the head, the way her hands rested on her hips. Emily pressed a hand to her mouth to keep from sobbing out loud. She watched Sarah live an entire day of a life Emily had never known existed. Laughing with regulars, handing over paper bags of pastries, wiping down tables. Normal, happy, safe, and every smile sent a fresh wave of anger through Emily. How could she just smile when their father was in the ground? Emily waited for the street to empty. At 5, the fog started rolling back in. Sarah brought the sign inside and reached for the deadbolt. This was it. Emily's legs felt like lead crossing the sidewalk. She reached the door just as Sarah's hand touched the lock, pulled it open. The bell above the frame rang out sharp. Sarah looked up, an apologetic smile already forming. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. We just closed the registers. I can grab you a loaf from the back." If the smile vanished. The color drained from her face. The coffee mug slipped from her fingers and shattered on the hardwood, hot coffee splashing across her apron and shoes. She didn't flinch. 10 feet apart, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator case. "Sarah," Emily whispered. Sarah's eyes filled with a terror that had nothing to do with joy or shock at seeing her sister. She didn't step forward. She looked past Emily, out through the front windows into the foggy street. "Did anyone follow you?" she demanded, her voice a harsh hiss. "What?" "No, I drove alone." Sarah crossed the room, grabbed Emily's arm and yanked her inside, slamming the door, throwing the deadbolt, pulling the green shades down over the windows, plunging the front of the shop into shadow. "Stop!" Emily shouted, pulling free. "What is wrong with you?" Do you have any idea what you did to us? Dad is dead. Mom is a shell. I spent 21 years thinking you were murdered somewhere, and you're here baking bread. Sarah pressed her back against the door and sank down it, sobbing I couldn't tell you. God, Em, I wanted to call every single day. I couldn't. Why? Emily screamed, past caring who heard. You walked out on your own wedding night. You left your dress on the bed. You let them search the woods with dogs. Why? Sarah looked up, face wet, eyes wide with a fear so deep it made Emily step back. Because if I hadn't left that night, she whispered, he was going to kill all of you. Mom, Dad, you, me. He would have slaughtered our whole family. A cold chill ran through Emily. Who? Even as she asked, she already knew. Mark. Sarah nodded slowly, pulling her knees to her chest. You thought he was perfect. Everyone did. The money, the charm, the family name it was all a mask. He wasn't a finance executive, Em. He was a monster. I didn't find out until the reception. Emily's mind flew back to the photograph. The note. Someone handed you a note. Sarah stood, wiped her face, and walked without a word into the kitchen. Emily followed, past the ovens, into a small, cramped office where Sarah pulled the blinds, knelt by a filing cabinet, and lifted a loose floorboard hidden under a rug. Underneath, a fireproof lockbox. She dialed the combination and popped it open. Inside, a stack of old $100 bills, a fake passport under the name Claire Thomas, and, at the bottom, a folded piece of yellowed paper sealed in a plastic sleeve. I was standing near the back of the ballroom, Sarah said, laying it on the desk, watching you and Dad dance. A woman in a catering uniform brushed past me, shoved this into my hand, and whispered, read it in the bathroom or you won't survive the night. Then she was gone. Who was she? I didn't know then. I found out later she was Mark's first wife, the one everyone said died in a boating accident 5 years before he met me. Emily's blood went cold. Mark's family never spoke of that marriage a tragedy, a closed subject. She wasn't dead, Sarah said. She faked it to escape him, and she risked everything coming back to that hotel to warn me. She slid the sleeve across the desk. Open it. Emily unfolded the paper with shaking hands and felt something small and solid inside it. A brass car key fell into her palm. Then she read the letter. Faded ink, frantic handwriting, no greeting. My name is Claire Davies. Mark told you I died in a boating accident. I didn't. I ran. Mark is not a finance executive. He is broke, buried in illegal gambling debts. He is a monster. He marries women with loving families, takes out fraudulent life insurance on them, and arranges accidents. Emily's hands shook so hard the paper rattled. He has a $2 million policy on you. Worse, he secretly took out policies on your mother, your father, and your sister. Tonight he plans to crush a sedative into your champagne. When you're out, he'll drag you into the shower, break your neck, make it look like a fall. After the payout, he plans to cut the brake lines on your parents' car before they drive home. If you go to police, you all die. His uncle is the county judge, and he will bury this and warn Mark first. The final lines were pressed so hard into the page they'd nearly torn through. The only way to save them is to vanish. Make it look like you chose to leave. No body, no payout. If you run, he has no reason to touch your family. He can't collect on any of it. Take this key. A gray sedan is parked behind the hotel kitchens. Drive north. Change your name. Never contact them. It's the only way they live. Emily dropped the letter, the room spinning. He told the police we drank the champagne, Sarah whispered. He lied. He poured 2 glasses, kissed my forehead, told me he loved me, and went to start the shower. She wrapped her arms around herself. I stood there in my dress and poured both glasses down the sink. I took the dress off, laid it out on the bed. I wanted him to know I wasn't taken, that I'd figured it out and chosen to walk away. I left my purse, my cards. I went down the back stairs, found the sedan, and drove until I hit the ocean. Every ounce of anger Emily had carried for 14 hours drained out of her at once. She hadn't been abandoned. Sarah had given up her name, her family, her entire life to keep a monster from the people she loved. She'd taken the name Claire to honor the woman who'd saved her. Emily crossed the small office and pulled her sister into her arms. They sank to the floor together, crying for every birthday missed, every year lost, for a father who died searching for the daughter who was, in her own way, still protecting him. "I'm so sorry I was angry," Emily cried. "You saved us. You saved all of us. I missed you every day," Sarah sobbed into her hair. They stayed there a long time. Then a new thought cut through the fog. Mark's uncle, the corrupt judge, had died 8 years ago. Mark no longer lived in their small town. He was in Chicago now, wealthy, remarried, with children. Emily pulled back. "Sarah, he has a new wife. New kids." The color drained from Sarah's face. If the pattern held, if he needed money, or simply grew bored, his new family was in exactly the danger the old one had escaped. "We can't go to local police," Emily said, steel in her voice now. "But we don't have to. We're going to the FBI. We have the letter. We have the key. We have you." The next morning, instead of driving home, the sisters drove straight to the FBI field office in Boston. It sounded at first like something out of a movie, a bride returning from the dead after 21 years to accuse a Chicago executive of attempted murder. But as Sarah laid out every detail, and agents began pulling Mark Davies's history, the story held. Investigators found the fraudulent insurance policies quietly taken out on the entire Miller family days before the wedding. They traced the gray sedan's VIN to a purchase made under a name linked to Mark's supposedly dead first wife. And in Chicago, under cover of a financial fraud investigation, a wiretap on Mark's current phones caught something worse. Buried in debt again after bad investments, he was trying to source an untraceable paralytic drug from a shady medical supplier. He was doing it again. 2 weeks after Emily walked into that bakery, FBI agents raided Mark's estate outside Chicago. He was at the breakfast table, coffee in hand, reading the paper The Perfect Husband, right up until they slammed him against the wall and cuffed him. He demanded a lawyer, threatened lawsuits, kept the arrogance up all the way to the federal holding facility. It shattered the moment the interrogation room door opened and Sarah walked in, not the terrified 24-year-old in a wedding dress, but a woman who'd survived 21 years in the shadows. Mark's face went white. He couldn't get a word out. "You thought you won," Sarah said, her voice steady and cold. "You didn't break us." "It's over, Mark." Faced with the letter, the wiretaps, and Sarah standing very much alive in front of him, his defense collapsed. He took a plea to avoid the death penalty, confessing to the murder of a college girlfriend years earlier, the attempted murder of his first wife, and the full plot against the Miller family. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms, without parole. The hardest part was still ahead, Ohio. A month later, Emily drove Sarah home, the autumn leaves burning the same gold and orange they had 21 years before. Martha was in her rocking chair by the window, knitting, the television murmuring in the background. "Mom," Emily said gently, "I brought someone to see you." Martha looked up over her reading glasses. Sarah stepped out from behind her sister, already crying. For a long second, nobody moved. Then Martha's knitting needles clattered to the floor. "Sarah," she whispered, like she was speaking to a ghost. "It's me, Mom. I'm here. I'm so sorry." Martha's cry seemed to carry 21 years of grief out of her body all at once. She crossed the room and pulled her daughter into a crushing hug, and they sank to the rug together, holding on until there were no tears left. That afternoon, the 3 of them stood at Thomas Miller's grave in the cold autumn wind. Sarah knelt in the grass, one hand on the granite, and told her father everything, why she'd left, how grateful she was that he'd never stopped looking, and that she was never leaving again. The town never learned the full story. The rumors faded, replaced by the simple, incredible fact that the vanished bride had finally come home. Sarah sold the bakery in Maine and moved back to Ohio, 3 blocks from her mother and sister, and opened a new one right in the center of town. Every morning, Emily stops by for coffee before work. Martha spends her afternoons in the corner booth, watching her daughters laugh behind the counter. Sometimes the darkest mysteries aren't solved by brilliant detectives or massive manhunts. Sometimes the truth just waits for the right photograph, the right moment, the right person willing to look closely enough to see what was hiding in the background all along. Sarah Miller lost 21 years of her life to a monster. But in losing them, she saved everyone she loved. And in the end, love turned out to be stronger than the darkness that tried to take them.